It's 2:30.
Hi guys, I'm having a computer problem, so I'm trying to talk fast because my Wi-Fi is acting strange. Today is Monday, the 19th of December, close to all the holiday. Happy Hanukkah, happy Christmas, for whatever is in the world. We're going to start with Board of Canvasser. So we have quorum. We have two things which they requested the staff rejecting untimely ballot. So we're going to move to reject them. They're not on time. Can somebody hear me?
I'll move.
Madam President, are
I'll
we
move.
convening right now as the Board of Canvassers?
Yeah, we are in Board of Canvasser now.
And out from your computer.
Is
Item which we
Move
need to
rejected.
discuss.
is the staff going to tell us
Yeah, staff.
when
Yeah,
they
staff
when they
requested.
arrived, or
Right.
the
They
basis for our
requested.
rejecting them?
Right. They requested. They wanted us to
Right,
reject.
but can they tell us on the record?
Okay, my name is Boris Brajkovic. I'm the manager of water services. Today, staff is presenting 101 untimely ballots to the Board of Canvassers to be rejected. These ballots were received in the period starting the legal deadline to receive timely ballots until today. Total is, as I said, is 101. We have 26 ballots that are domestic and 85 that are overseas. Out of those 101, we have 52 that are postmarked by election day. They all 52 came from the overseas. However, they were received untimely by the board.
Okay.
So just so I understand, you're saying that the 52 were mailed on time, but took too long to get to us. They didn't get to us by 10 days after Election Day.
That's correct.
And the remainder of, you said there were 101 total,
101 total.
right?
26 is domestic. They were
Right.
mailed postmarked after the legal deadline.
Okay,
Out of 85 that are overseas, 52 were postmarked within the legal deadline, but reached us too late.
so there are no domestic ballots that were postmarked timely but arrived late in this group.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think Alan made a motion to reject them and I will second the motion.
Thank you very much. Those in favor of the motion,
Aye.
raise the hand.
Aye.
Raise the aye. Oppose? All right then. The reject. Second one is the canvas minute. I'm sure you got it. I don't know whether you got a chance to review it. Did everybody? You got it? Everybody read it?
Madam President, I believe I saw
Okay.
one correction that was to remove the word primary. Is that correct?
I didn't receive them.
I
Yeah,
thought there was a member of the board. that-
Yeah, I did. The word, there was a word primary in there and you didn't mean to do that. It should be. Delete that word primary.
General canvas.
Yes, did anyone else, did the page number seem off at the bottom? My page numbering was incorrect in the Canvas minutes.
Oh,
But
When were
I
these
didn't
canvas
check the
minutes sent
page.
out? When were these canvas minutes sent out? I don't have a record of having received them, but if they were more than a couple weeks ago, maybe.
Lisa,
Madam President, I didn't send the canvas minutes out. I believe the acting director sent them out with her report.
That's correct. On Thursday.
Allison, right?
Okay, I'll double check. I don't think I got the acting director's report or the canvas minutes. Still having trouble receiving emails from some.
Yes, those were sent out
Friday?
on, well, let's see, I have them as of yesterday.
I believe they were sent December 15th, Thursday, December 15th, at 11:47 p.m.
Okay,
Okay, I'll double check. I don't think I got those, so.
yeah, I have them.
Yeah, December 15 at 11 a.m. Right.
Uh-oh.
Alex,
All right,
I just forwarded the entire email message to you. I don't know if you'll get any better luck if it's coming from me.
Okay,
And the only
Okay.
correction that I recommend is removing the word primary on page 4.
With
hang
one
on.
correction.
got it, David.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't see page numbers. Where is page 4?
That's page 4 at the of 8 at the bottom.
Okay. Hang on. So you're saying that you, is it just a one-word deletion is what you're proposing?
Yes.
Huh.
I'm sorry, clarification, change or deleted?
Why wouldn't we say gubernatorial general election like we do elsewhere and like we do in the heading?
That's fine.
Yeah, that would be fine. Yeah, I see all the page numbers.
Okay.
And it reads correctly, page 4 of, because all of mine said like 3 of page 2, page 3 of 2, page 6 of 2.
Interesting.
And
Mine
mine
say-
have no page numbers at all.
Mine says page 3 of 7 and page 4 of 7 and so forth.
So yours is correct, okay.
Huh, okay.
Okay.
So we're gonna change, wherever that primary was, we're gonna say gubernatorial general election. Delete primary before gubernatorial, add general after gubernatorial in that line.
Page 4.
Yeah, page 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Well, on the,
It's more than that on my page, but like I said, mine may be different than yours.
okay, well, it says the 2022 primary gubernatorial election provisional ballots breakdown. And the primary at the top of the second table, and primary should be removed there. And then also in line 3, it says applicant voted the wrong party primary ballot. I'm not, but that says 0.
Yeah, it's a rejection code that we don't have in the general election, but I
Right,
guess
right.
there's no harm in having it on the list.
Yeah, because it's 0, but
Right.
take out the primary of the title.
So that's it.
And with that correction, I move we accept the minutes.
I second it.
Seconded. Alan seconded.
Yes.
Yes. Those in favor of the motion, raise the hand.
Aye.
Please. Opposed? Okay, accepted. Any other issue in the canvas, since we're in the canvas?
I'm just going to make a brief comment, which is that I believe I noticed the word primary in the certification documents for the general election. I will find that for you and send it to you, but it's possible that we may need to correct that as well. Because obviously we were certifying the general election on November 30th, not the primary.
All right then. Thank you very much, David. Any other suggestion? Do I have a motion to get out of canvas and go to the general meeting?
I'll move.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
All right,
All right then. Now we are in a general meeting, November 19. The call on now. President remark, just wish everybody a holiday, whatever you believe, just enjoy the moment. Campaign contribution. Anybody? David,
I got
yes.
Um,
Diane, okay. Yes.
Diane, you want to go first? Go ahead.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, these are old, but they're since the last board meeting. 250 to Sully Sullivan, Reardon Sullivan, and there was 50 to Dwight Patel.
Okay. David?
I did not make the contribution. My wife did, but I attended the 60th birthday comedy night sponsored by Congressman Jamie Raskin. That was on, I believe, I believe it was on December the 11th.
Thank you. Lisa, public comment.
Naheed, before we get to public comment, I just wanted to say for the record, under additions and changes to the agenda, there will be an executive session at the end of of our open session to discuss a personnel matter.
And could I also add that I have a new business item that I want to just start the conversation on today, but it can be put off until January
Yeah,
once I
okay,
set the
yes.
table for it.
Right.
Thank you.
When we get that, that's fine. So, public comment. Lisa?
Madam President, we have Mr. Michael Fletcher, who's requested to address the board. His written comments was submitted to the board members a little bit ago today. Mr. Fletcher, if you're
Okay.
on, please acknowledge your presence. If Jerry can assist to see if Mr. Fletcher is on.
Mr. Fletcher is on the attendee list and his hand is raised. So
Yeah,
Jerry should be able
Jerry just needs to
come over.
promote him.
I've tried and he's rejected twice.
One would think inadvertently.
Mr. Fletcher, in order to speak at our meeting, you need to accept, there you go.
There he is. And then unmute, please.
Hmm.
Okay, Mr. Fletcher?
Oh, boy.
Not well.
I'm not hearing.
I'm not hearing anything.
Mr. Fletcher?
Oh, boy.
Oh,
Can
Kevin?
you hear me now?
Yeah,
I just hit unmute, nothing happened.
There he is.
I can hear you.
Now we can hear you.
This is great. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh,
We can hear you.
I can hear. Mr.
can I.
Fletcher, go ahead.
Now we can't.
can you unmute me?
You're good. Keep
Go
talking.
ahead. We hear you.
We can hear you.
He must be hitting the button where he mutes us.
Hmm.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Go.
Very good. Can you hear me now? Very
Yes.
good. Technology is wonderful.
Oh, boy.
I suggest,
Anytime, Mr. Fletcher.
if we have a problem, we get a chance to read it, we can email him or
Sounds like
talk,
a big
whatever.
Is there a phone call in that people can use?
Yes,
Maybe-
phone number's on our website.
Is there a way to send
I will
him?
begin my comments.
Oh,
Okay.
All right. My name is, I have sent letters and presented public comments to the board expressing my concerns regarding
oh, boy.
Mr. Fletcher, we have a problem to hear you, sir.
Yeah, you're
Madam
cutting in
President,
and out.
this is Lisa. Would you like
Hello?
me to call
Can
Mr.
you hear me?
Fletcher and try to make different arrangements?
In
Yes,
the past,
please.
Okay,
have expressed concerns. All right. Thank you, Mr. Damon. I'll watch your thumb. Today, I would like to bring to your attention that bolsters my case for eliminating machines in our voting system. First, you may be aware of the lawsuit filed in Maricopa County, Arizona, regarding fraud in last month's election. Boy, I'm hearing a lot of crosstalk here.
Oh,
But I don't see anybody speaking.
Could
Uh,
Lisa,
This lawsuit points out significant
can we call Mr. Fletcher, Lisa, and
problems with
I'm getting-
machines used
I'd like to recommend to maybe disconnect Mr.
in the
Fletcher and then we'll
elections.
call him BSL.
Yes, yes, Lisa, please.
Jerry, if you can please disconnect
Second,
Mr.
the
Fletcher and
team
then
of
I'll follow up. Thank you.
he'll call in, correct? We'll listen to him telephonically.
I'm gonna try to make some arrangements with
Hold on.
him and then I'll let you guys know.
Right,
Thank
right,
you.
okay, thank you. Maybe we continue with our meeting until to solve the problem. All right, then, let's go to the next one. We will come back whenever they. Election Director Report. Alison.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Not echoing.
all right, go ahead,
Can you hear
Alison.
me okay?
Yes.
Yes,
I'm gonna have to unmute the sound though, so that I can hear the board. Now, can you hear me okay?
yes, yes.
Okay, we're just switching audio from one device to another so we can all hear each other. So there we go. I circulated the acting election director's report on Thursday. Without reading it verbatim, the first section simply says when the advanced materials were provided to the board. The second item is we had two outstanding action items from our previous meetings. And the first one, I know there's been a significant amount of discussion among the board members about. The board had been interested in seeing our work as far as the information that the staff relied on in calculating the stipend for the Canvas workers. And so what I've provided to the board in the acting director's report is a chart that indicates for the other 6 largest jurisdictions in the state, what their how their pay was calculated for their Canvas workers, which in some cases was an hourly rate and in some cases was a total amount with as best information as I could obtain about the standard number of hours that they use. What you see when you look at that chart is that we are tied effectively with Anne Arundel County in providing the effectively the largest hourly rate or equivalent of an hourly rate to our Canvas workers when you kind of mash together the daily stipend and the hours worked. There was a higher daily stipend paid by Baltimore City and by Howard County and by Baltimore County, but each of those jurisdictions indicated to us that they had a longer number of hours on their Canvas days. I'm happy to take any questions, or other members of the staff here can take any questions that you may have about what that chart indicates.
What does election day hours mean under Howard County?
That was the way that Howard County's personnel characterized to us that it was, they basically had 2 kinds of Canvas days. They had one very long day, which they characterized as being like election day hours. And they also had very short arrangements for very short Canvas day, which they paid $100 for. I did
So
not
what?
get hours.
All right, so it wasn't actually on election day. This was post-election canvassing, or well, whichever. But it was, but with long days like it was election day.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I understand one of them provide free lunch to canvasser. I don't know which one was it, Howard or so.
I wasn't asked about that. I didn't inquire about that. I do remember being in Howard County when they were doing a recount at one point, and I do remember there being quite a spread. Yes. No, that's not something that we've done.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Also, Allison, there was a issue about whether raising the pay would make the pay higher than temporary staff. Was it temporary staff? Do temporary staff receive benefits?
Temporary staff do not receive benefits aside from a limited allotment of sick and safe leave.
Please raise your hand if you have a question that I know who. Thank you, Alex. Go ahead.
So Allison, looking at all this, are you saying that when you account for the number of hours per Canvas day, that at least on a daily basis, what we have agreed to pay the election worker stipend is tied for the highest in the state? Is that right?
Not on a daily basis.
Not on a daily basis, because there were jurisdictions that paid more on a daily basis, but for more hours. And so that's where, because we had a shorter day and we're canvassing on more days, I'm providing the information broken down as an hourly equivalent, which was the way that we thought of it as staff.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question for Allison? Thank you. Board
And I'm
attorney.
sure,
No, she was only partway
She's
through
still
her
young.
report.
Right.
and
Go ahead,
I'm
Allison.
sure we will, revisit and reconsider these questions as we move forward and into the 2024 election. The other outstanding item that I'm still carrying over that is an action item from previous meetings is the discussion about different types of postmarks from the post office, and in particular, some questions that board members had about a type of postmark that you saw a lot of on the day after Election Day. We simply haven't quite managed to make that connection with the post office yet, but we'll work on that in advance of the January meeting and be ready to close out that conversation, provide better information on that by the January meeting. I just wanted to put a placeholder in here that I recognize that it's an outstanding board question that we just haven't concluded the staff follow-up on yet.
David.
Allison, are you saying that the meeting with the Postal Service will be before the January meeting, or merely that you're going to have more to tell us at the January meeting?
I'm basically saying that as I was going through my materials in preparation for this meeting, I realized that while we had sent the images and question over to the Rockville Postmaster, that I personally hadn't followed up on that. And so I need to follow up. We need to follow up so that we can make that conversation happen. No, I haven't scheduled a meeting.
So you haven't yet contacted them to ask for a meeting?
I did contact them, yes, but I have not followed up.
Could you please be a little more specific? Did you send them an email? Did they respond to it? Did you call them?
I sent an email. I have not seen a response. I have not placed a phone call.
Okay. I would appreciate it if you would let me know when that meeting is being held, because I would like to attend. Thank you.
For the State Board of Elections item, I merely note that the State Board did in fact certify the results of the election on December 7th. The voter registration, the latest voter registration numbers were distributed to the board and provided the latest voter registration count, which also appears on our website. For personnel, I noted that we have quite a number of vacancies in permanent positions right now. The new information for the board, we had not yet reported to you that we did have another staff member retire, Linda Carroll, who's been working with us for many years in voter registration. So we're interviewing for a replacement for Linda. Linda's a fabulous member of the team, and we're all very excited for her to have the opportunity to do some other things with her with her time, but we miss Linda. She was a great member of the team here. We are interviewing for a replacement position in addition to the other positions that we have that are vacant. And so we would normally continue to have a number of temporary employees on the payroll past the election. There will be more of that this time, largely because we have so many vacancies in our permanent staff. And so we're hiring for some of that work, including voting equipment maintenance, voter registration, list maintenance, things like that. But we would normally retain temporary staff for. We'll be doing even more so since we're down staffed for now on our permanent staff. I did flag also, I don't have anything meaty to really provide as far as a legislative report yet, aside from noting.
Elise has her hands up. Excuse me, Allison.
I'm
Elise has her
sorry.
hands up.
Alex is up,
Yes.
but I'm waiting for Allison to finish. Alex,
I just had a question about the personnel. I guess it seemed appropriate to ask that now. Have we ever had this many permanent positions vacant, Allison, at any one time? It seems like a lot.
We've had a rolling 20% vacancy rate for over a year.
Huh. Okay. Wow, that's pretty high.
It's not unusual in the county right now. The whole county, including the Office of Human Resources, is really understaffed.
Any thoughts on why that is?
I mean, I have my own thoughts. I think that the workforce has certainly changed post-COVID. And we are not a workplace that is as accommodating of telework as some others. Plus, there's just a lot of demands that we were looking for people to work full-time plus, that I think are things that make it more challenging to recruit here in elections. But I also know that it's not alone to elections, and I do know that the job market is just tight, generally speaking, and that other county departments relate to us that they are not seeing as many applicants or having as easy time filling positions. There's also a piece of it, quite frankly, for us where we have not been as aggressively able to work the pipeline to try to fill these positions over the last few months as we've been really focusing on executing the election ourselves. And so that is something that we will be working in the next few weeks to get some additional ads up and to launch some new recruitments for some of these positions as well. Like the 3 new positions in IT, we have not had an opportunity to advertise for yet. So we will do that shortly.
Great, thank you.
any question for Allison?
Yes, my question, could we add just for the record what Ms. Cairo's position was, just so we would know what position that is that's being filled, whatever the title was?
Which position?
Linda Cairo.
Oh, Linda was an office services coordinator or voter registration coordinator, sometimes an acting title that we've used.
Thank you.
For legislation, I will note that there is, of course, a legislative session coming up beginning in January. The only text that I had in the acting director's report was just regarding the fact that there's actually a hearing work session, possible votes tomorrow in the Montgomery County delegation hearing. The Education, Elections, and Housing Committee is going to meet tomorrow, and they do have 2 bills, both related to ranked choice voting, that are on their docket for tomorrow to discuss. And I wanted to draw that to your attention. These are not new issues. These are topics that have been discussed before. The legislation is very similar to bills that have been talked about in the past.
I believe that the legislation has already been heard. I think that the subcommittee you're referring to is a work session, because I understand that when they had the hearing, there were some questions about what our views about it are. And I'm wondering whether either the staff has a position about the feasibility of ranked choice voting or whether our board has ever taken a position on the feasibility of ranked choice voting. I also believe that one of the bills has an education of the voters requirement, and I didn't know whether that was going to be something that we would then be called upon to fund. And I was wondering if you have any information about that.
I have an outstanding request from the Department of Legislative Services. They're looking for some information from me to support their fiscal notes on these bills. I have not been contacted to request a position from the board on these bills recently. I'm trying to remember back from previous years, and aside from the fiscal note, the board had really taken a position. Much of the discussion surrounds the administration of these processes using the state systems.
Right. I mean, and I'm not advocating that we necessarily have to have a position on the policy of ranked choice voting. And as I understand it, at least the county legislation is to allow the county to do it, but doesn't implement it. The county would still have to vote to do it.
Right.
I don't
And I
remember
think
which
the costs would vary whether it was in, depending on the method that was chosen.
You mean different methods of ranked choice voting?
Yeah. Or approval voting, which is also allowed for by the.
But this
Got it.
does not require ranked choice voting throughout the state. It's only for Montgomery County.
As I understand one of the bills, it's permissive for Montgomery County to decide to hold ranked choice voting for county offices, not for state offices. And then there's one that was for ranked choice voting in Tacoma Park, I believe, but I'm not an expert. I don't know. I mean, part of my concern is that we're being told about it after the hearing already happened. So I don't know if we have a view about this or not. I would be concerned if we're being asked to spend local money for an education campaign, because I would guess that we would have a lot of things we'd want to spend local money on relating to elections, and this would just be, in line with everything else. I don't, I don't have the specifics on any of that.
I wasn't watching the calendar. I was sort of focused in the election. I did see that there is this work session tomorrow, so I included that in the report. The
hearing was last week, I believe.
Last Thursday.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It was after we certified.
Gotcha. The only, I guess, incoming contact I have received on this in the last period of time has been the request from the Department of Legislative Services for information for the fiscal notes.
Did that have a deadline attached to it?
It does have a deadline, but I don't recall what it is offhand. It's on my list of things to attend to. And we have done fiscal notes on these in the past, but we'll have to have some more discussions with the state about where their thoughts are on the methods, because I mean, at this point, the voting system lease is up in 2025, I believe. And so, these are what the costs would be, are things that are, fiscal note is something that, yes, the outreach side of it, we have prepared a fiscal note in the past on, and I can certainly share that. But the actual tabulation methods and what that would require of us during the post-election period is something that would really be a matter of how the state would provide for it to be done.
Diane, go ahead.
Yeah, David's hand has preceded mine.
Oh, I'm sorry. I will lower it. You go ahead,
Okay.
Diane.
Allison, is it appropriate to ask if you can keep us informed on updates when you get a timeline, excuse me, on this legislation?
Yeah.
And a little more info on it? Just,
can
I
do.
think this is a hot enough topic that we need to become as informed as we can before this train leaves the station. I have some very strong opinions on it when the time comes.
As do I.
Yes, so do I.
Okay. Alistair.
Thank you.
And I noted, although we haven't had this section on the director's report in a while because we haven't been doing anything but administering the election in a while. But we used to apprise the board of any meetings that were coming up that our staff is planning to attend. And there are some January meetings, both the national meeting, the Joint Election Officials Liaison Conference, which is run by the Election Center, and the state meeting of the Maryland Association of Counties Winter Conference that I am personally planning to attend. And I have been asked to speak on a panel, which is not yet told to be my thoughts, but I've been asked to speak on a panel of local officials at the Mako Winter Conference, so I am planning to do that. The Joint Election Officials Liaison Conference is a good opportunity to talk with representatives of the Postal Service. And in the past, we have had other members of our staff come and participate in those conversations. So I am looking to do that as well, which will hopefully inform our conversations in future meetings about Postal Service topics. And then, of course, there will be a lot of lessons learned conversations with the State Board of Elections and with other counties on a variety of topics. And those are beginning to come into shape for the January time period, which sort of runs into the next section of the acting director's report, which is how we as a team are going to be handling the grappling with all our lessons learned from the 2022 election season. And I have we're working with the managers, we're shaping how those conversations are happening internally. But I also want to propose to you as a board that you consider authorizing the staff to depart from the way that we have handled this in the past. I personally think, and I think I speak on behalf of the managers, that we don't necessarily think that doing a topic, a meeting, a section, a meeting, stretching sort of our lessons learned debriefings with the board out through about a year or so is maybe perhaps the most timely or effective way to present the information to you. And so our thought is that perhaps it would be more useful to you, more timely for the voters, if we were to pull together our lessons learned presentation into a tighter time frame, move it up. But of course, in the interest of doing comprehensive presentations, not necessarily doing that in January, but sort of consolidating all of that into a single lessons learned presentation debriefing on the 2022 election in the month of February. It is obviously, up to the board, up to the board chair, how you wish to set the agenda. But I want to propose to you on behalf of the staff, because we are thinking that the sort of multi-part debriefing that we've done in the past, so many of these pieces are overlapping and feed into each other, that there are, it feels like it begins to lend itself to more of a single cohesive presentation rather than debriefing on absentees, separate from a debriefing on election judges, separate from a debriefing on the sort of election operations generally, separate from voter registration, separate from training. Throwing that out there for your conversations, discussions as we move forward. And then the final thing in the director's report is the website. Is simply that we have gone ahead and made the shift to note that the election has occurred, that we certified the election past tense. We'll be working through the website to update other information, both to refresh our content, make sure, I'm sure right now we still have some cobwebs up there that are speaking in future tense about some things that have happened in the past and that need to be updated. But we've also, we'll be having some conversations with TEBS about our website, generally speaking, as we often do in the off year. There's one section that I did omit from the director's report, and that was an oversight on my part, which was the budget. Lisa, would you mind handing me the budget spreadsheet? I know.
And can we talk about some of the things that you've already gone over before we get to the budget?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know, Alice or David, which one of your hand was
I'll
first?
let David go ahead of me, that's fine.
Okay, David,
Okay, thank you. Allison, ordinarily, when you make a presentation like the Mako presentation, is there anybody who you run that by? Like, do you tell the board president? Do you tell the county executive's office or anyone along those lines? Because this meeting is going to include probably all 11 Montgomery County Council members and the county executive, not to mention officials across the state.
I did not request permission before agreeing to speak, but I am happy to, I didn't expect there to be any opposition to that, but I am happy to coordinate my messaging as I pull it together with members of the board.
Well, I think that would be very helpful. One of the things that I looked up the meeting online because I didn't have any other information about it. And the meeting online suggests that one of the things that panelists are being asked to do is to explore innovative policies and new solutions to advance and promote free, fair, and secure elections. And as you know, we've been very interested in getting your views and staff's views about that kind of thing for some time. And we certainly would want to know about what it is you might be proposing to all of the county officials in the state. We would want you to coordinate with us on that. And so it would be very helpful. If we could get a summary of your presentation, I don't know what your vacation plans are, but if we can get a summary of your presentation by the end of this week, that would be very, very helpful. And that would give us an opportunity, if we have any thoughts about it, to share them with you. As you may recall, we didn't really get that opportunity for your testimony to the legislature, and I do not want a repeat of that.
What I can, so the initial, I did have an initial conversation with Kevin Canale from the Maryland Association of Counties and with the some of the other individuals that they're having on the panel. Well, really, it was me and the person that they're having from the Partisan Policy Center speak. And the way that I understand this particular panel is intended to be shaped is my role on the panel really to just sort of describe the landscape within which election officials are working right now and sort of set the scene on the types of challenges and issues that we're facing. And then it is really the role of the representatives from the state board and from the Bipartisan Policy Center speaking nationally to sort of off of that foundation of what I have described of what election officials in Maryland are, the types of elections that we're running and what sort of challenges we're facing, then to, that conversation about new and innovative proposals is probably more something that comes from them than from me. But I'm happy to write something up that articulates where I believe this section is headed. I certainly don't have anything approaching a presentation, or was I, quite frankly, really planning on doing a PowerPoint presentation for this. But I can certainly provide like a summary of the way that the conversations about this panel are shaping up.
Well, I think it'd be very helpful to get a sense as to what you think are the challenges. And I would remind you that this is also an opportunity for us in a unified way to talk about any challenges that we are going to end up asking the county executive and the county council about, including the vacancies that you mentioned before, the need for more staff, the need for the mail sorting equipment to help us with beeping in the ballots, and a whole variety of other things. The issue with how long it takes us to process mail-in ballots and anything we can do to help them. All of the issues that we've been discussing. Yep. So I think it would be very helpful. And if, like I said, if we could get it by the end of this week, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I really haven't had an opportunity to pull my thoughts together on it as much as I would like to yet. Actually, this panel was not, this wasn't pitched by me. This was actually pitched by another election official who's unable to attend. And so I was asked to serve on the panel instead. But I'm with you. I'm looking forward to gathering my thoughts on this, but I quite frankly haven't yet. So
Okay,
I'll
well,
share the
we'll
thoughts
look
with the board
forward.
as they evolve. I don't know
We'll
that
look-
it'll be by the end of this week.
Elise has a question. Elise, go ahead. Elise.
Were you finished, David?
Well, the only thing I was going to say is that the last thing that Allison said is that she didn't know it was going to be this week. So I just want to know when it's going to be.
I don't know. I haven't thought about that yet. I don't even know when I'm taking my own leave yet. I may be able to pull it off by the end of this week. I may not. I just don't want to overpromise it.
Okay, well, I would just say that all of us, you included, but certainly all of us have competing demands on our time. And it would be very helpful to know when we should expect to receive it so that we can set aside some time to review it. The presentation is on January the 5th. January the 3rd is too late.
Okay.
January the 2nd is a holiday. January the 1st, also a holiday and a Sunday. So, if it's not going to be this week, I would appreciate your letting us know by tomorrow when we can expect to receive it.
That's fair enough. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Elise?
Okay, I had a question about you mentioned the Joint Election Officials Liaison Conference. You said you're going. Are any other members of the staff going as well, or is it just going to be you?
Not yet. I haven't yet coordinated which other staff are available to come join me at that, but I would like to bring along some more staff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and then my final question is, you mentioned having discussions with the state board staff about lessons learned in early January. And so this sort of relates to the timeline that you are proposing for providing basically what sounds like that same information to us. So my question is, if you can pull it together for a meeting with state board staff, why can't we just have a copy of that on the same timeline that you're preparing it for them if it's going to be in early January, and that way you don't have to duplicate efforts?
I'm not pulling anything together for those meetings. These are sort of staff level meetings where our recruiters will talk to the other folks in other counties and with the state about election judge recruitment and training. Our vote by mail team will talk with the state and other counties about absentee. I mean, other than there being meetings beginning to be put on the calendar for these, to occur, it's not like there's been a request for us to provide some sort of a document at this time. I mean, I'm hearing in the stream of the questioning, what I hear is that there are board members that would really just like more of an ongoing update from the staff through me about what we are working on in the next couple of weeks. And I think that is fair. I think that as our thoughts, I have not quite gotten there yet. And I think a lot of the staff hasn't quite gotten there yet in terms of getting through the holidays, wanting to take some time off and reflect before we really are putting pen to paper on some of these things. But you are our first audience and our most important stakeholders here. And so I will strive to figure out how we can best package what's going on here and all of these things that we're reflecting on, what the conversations are, in a way that is, work with you and, work through the board chair on how to best accomplish that sort of communication with all of you and out to all of you.
Okay, so have these meetings with the state staff, state board staff, have those meetings occurred in the past? Is this a new thing?
Now, we always have, and they're always going to be structured a little bit differently depending on what we're talking about, but we always have variety, we sort of refer to it loosely as lessons learned, but we always have a variety of debriefings and conversations after any general election to try to capture the, the notes, thoughts, and before the next election season.
Okay, but you're saying that basically you walk into these meetings with no notes, just kind of unprepared. You just kind of walk in and kind of have a free for all as you're meeting with the state board staff? I mean,
it's really, it really is going to vary. How these meetings are structured is just really varies by the topic. And so what I was trying to say, and maybe I didn't say it very well, what I was trying to say is that I don't have a time frame of any deliverables or any deliverables that we have been asked for that I have, I'm in a position to just provide that to you, just as I have provided it to the state. But I will have the conversation with the managers about what materials or thoughts. I mean, I know that, for example, there was some sort of a survey that was sent around from the state on some IT things. There's a variety of different ways that the state has to gather information from us, a variety of different ways that we will respond to them, either verbally or in writing. And I think that is something that I am hearing you say as a board, that there ought to be a way for us to package that for you timely. And so I think we can do that.
Thank you.
Alan,
Yeah, you mentioned before about the lessons learned and talking to us in February about that. Given the fact that the legislature is going to be cooking in January, if you have any kind of recommendations for legislative changes, would it be good for you to present those to us in advance of the January meeting so we can talk about it as soon as possible?
Can I add something to that, please?
yes,
Um,
David.
The legislature actually has a rule that you cannot introduce legislation after the 3rd of February without suspending the rules and basically getting a supermajority vote. So February is really too late for any suggestions that might turn into legislation. And in reality, January 23rd, when we're scheduled to meet, is kind of on the late side too, but that at least leaves about 10 days before that deadline for introducing legislation. And I realize not every lesson learned is going to turn into legislation. But if it is going to turn into legislation, if you wait until after February 3rd, we may be out of luck. And I think there's very little chance that the legislature will pass any election-related changes in 2024 with a primary at the end of April, nor would we necessarily want them to with a primary at the end of April. So to me, it would make, what Alan is saying would make a lot of sense, that we would want to get whatever we can. I love the idea of not spreading it out and doing it, at one time. I just think it might have to be an earlier time.
One more thing about if the state, the meeting with the state board of elections produces good ideas for legislation, or for any kind of good ideas, we'd like to get some feedback if you can on what the other officials are saying at that meeting. Okay.
Diane,
I
Elise
just
was asking
have,
about before.
She has
I'm asking about
follow-up.
after.
Ellen, what? I'm sorry.
I was saying, Elise was asking about getting your input before the panel. I'm asking about after, getting information after.
You're saying both.
Oh yeah, before and after.
Okay, so on both of those, I'm just asking for clarification, mainly because of what Alan just said. Am I clear that Allison is not going to be proposing or presenting or recommending legislative changes, improvements with outside of what the board recommends? Is that correct?
Well, if you're talking about what I was referring to what recommendations she's going to make to us.
Yeah,
That was
no,
what-
but Alan.
That's what I was referring to. I was just hoping that it would be timely enough that we can then try and make recommendations to the legislature based on what we as a board decide to do. But I was asking about her making recommendations to us in a timely enough way to do that.
Okay, and I thought I heard Alan say, could you let us know? It sounded to me like there was a mix up in the process, that Allison would be presenting things and Alan wanted us to know what, then be told what they were. My understanding is the way the board works, there are no recommendations or proposals ever made in a legislative area that don't come directly as a board proposal, correct?
Well, I wasn't clear. What I'm talking about is
Yeah,
Allison telling us what was discussed at the meeting that we should know about, not just legislation.
You mean the January 5th panel
Yeah.
at the
Right.
Maryland Association of Counties?
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what David was getting at was that if her presentation is going to involve some, recommendations of legislative changes to some drastically different ways of doing something, that would be something we'd like to have some input on.
well, I'm not only saying I'd like it, I'm looking for a confirmation that it is the practice of this board that nothing like that goes forward without coming from the board first. Can I have a confirmation on that?
I'll do this. So I think that
Board members, whoever.
the combination of everything that I'm hearing and which is causing my own reflections here as well. I think it is perfectly rational for the board to want some information, want some deeper thoughts, especially before I or anybody else goes off saying them to others. So what I will do exactly as David requested, I'll just prioritize things in such a way that before the end of this week, I will get some notes on my thoughts on where we stand. Not necessarily perhaps that'll be a draft presentation for January 5th, but I think what you're actually asking for is probably beyond what I'll do on January 5th. But I will come up with a deliverable to provide to all of you that I think will, at a minimum, lay out what I am thinking of saying or what I'm planning to say at this January 5th meeting, which is probably much less than your, I'm not going to go off and make any policy recommendations, but that meeting is really much more one of me just sort of laying the landscape of what local election administration looks like in Maryland. But I can detail that, as far as there's that particular panel and my role in speaking on it. There is the ongoing lessons learned conversation with the state board and with other local boards on really more administrative matters. And then there is the policy conversation that overlaps both administratively and conversations with the legislature. And obviously they're all interrelated, but three different things there. And so I will, on the policy side of it, I will take some time to sort of lay out what thoughts I have for the board. But I'll say, I did have a conversation. The Maryland Association of Election Officials has a legislative committee, which consists of the directors and deputies of each of the counties. And I have had 2 conversations since the election with the chair of the legislative committee, and quite frankly, the gist of those conversations was trying to figure out what where even other counties are on a lot of this right now, and what some of these lessons might be. Nothing new to the board, nothing that what I was asked about There are some other counties and some other election officials that for more than a year now, that for more than 2 years now, have been saying that what we really need in the state of Maryland is to go to vote centers. And so, you know, we had some conversations about what that would look like. If the legislature went in that direction, which quite frankly, I don't think they are anytime soon. And if the election officials in Maryland were to choose to try to go in that direction, if the boards were to try to choose to go in that direction, then what would be the other kinds of questions we would need to ask? And so, you know, some of my thoughts are things like, how many vote centers would we need? How many more could we handle? I think election officials that think that we're going to make the problems of election judge recruitment go away by going to vote centers are probably underappreciating how many vote centers we would still need to staff if we went to vote centers. How many ballot marking devices that we would need in order to support that. The challenge of using pre-printed ballots, we were at our absolute max in terms of the capacity of our building and what we could hold with the vote centers that we supported in 2020. And that was with such a low level of in-person voting in 2020. And so we have capacity issues, we have space issues, we have a lot of challenges that we face in looking at any kind of structural change to the way that elections are done in Maryland. They're not easy. They're tied up in questions of our voting system, in questions of our inventory of equipment, in questions about our use of space. This stuff isn't easy. It's not a matter of quick little fixes, I don't think. It's really some deep structural conversations about the way we run elections in Maryland that I don't think anybody's ready for in the 2023 legislative session. That's me. Those are my reflections and the tenor of some of the conversations among the officials about these sort of big questions of the future of elections. Some of the things that I am beginning to focus on, to think about, and that I think we as a staff want to reflect on and have some opportunities over the next month or two to really flesh out our thoughts on for you and for other audiences, would be how we serve the changing expectations of our voters. The number of voters who are doing things like requesting an absentee ballot and then showing up at a polling place and ending up having to go to provisional ballot. And if there are better ways to serve them, and if finding better ways to serve them would require legislation or regulation or what it would take to serve those voters more effectively. Same thing with the voters who show up out of precinct on election day. You know, of course, you're all well familiar with, and I think if there's one thing that our board has probably been most outspoken about over time, other than the need to open some of these ballots earlier, it has been the challenges that we're faced as a result of the volume of the web delivery ballots that we have. You know, I think those are the topics, those are the issues that come to mind when we think big thoughts. We talk about the future of elections and legislation and where it will go. You know, that's just framing questions. I don't have any policy proposals, and that's where my head is. But I'm happy to put together a more articulate set of thoughts in writing for you. I don't have any easy answers. I don't have any quick answers. I don't have anything new here on the horizon.
Elise, you have a question?
Yes, just sort of, and again, I may be misinterpreting Alan, but I think also he was talking in terms of when we talk about the meetings with the state board, sort of by division or whatever, while they're sharing lessons learned, if any really good lessons learned come out of those meetings with people from other county particular areas, that, you know, those get back to us as well, you know, that we kind of learn. If, you know, not all wisdom may come from Montgomery County, there might be some really good ideas, best practices that come up in those meetings. We would like to know about those.
Yep.
David.
So,
I was just going to make clear that I was not suggesting that there is no place for any policy suggestions. I was just suggesting that there's no place for policy suggestions that haven't been coordinated with us in advance.
Well,
I think there's a lot of policy suggestions that are not particularly controversial among us. And you're mentioning the ballot marking devices makes me think of two of them. One being, it would be great, and consider this to be a request, for a follow-up from this meeting. I'd like to know what percentage of in-person voters use the ballot marking devices overall. And if the percentage was different for the primary and the general. But I think that that data is going to tell us that we need more ballot marking devices because the voters absolutely love the ballot marking devices. And then the second thing is you mentioned about the capacity for all the paper ballots. The ballot marking devices were originally designed to be used in early voting to eliminate the need for a lot of the paper. But because of the navigation issue that we discussed in the primary that doesn't allow more than 7 candidates on a page, that was the hang up with using the ballot marking devices more. And, we as a board have been advocating for that upgrade since 2016, I believe. And I would think if you have a room full of county officials, that might be something worth mentioning. That, I'm sure that, a good proportion of the county officials in the room will have last names from T to Z, and they're going to be worried about that ballot marking device as well. So all across the state. So anyway, my thought was not keep it content free. My thought was let's coordinate on the content.
Alan?
Speaking of ballot marking devices, Allison, have you figured out how much they cost?
I have those numbers around, and it depends. There's a sort of a straight purchase price. There's when it's financed over time. Janet, did you want to answer that question, or I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'd have to look them up.
Let me go look at my sheet. It'll tell me how much it costs. We should look at the state bill to see. That's what it is. The inventory, and the inventory they enter on.
I can't hear.
So do you want to pull that up and give it to them during the meeting, or you want to get it to them after the meeting? Okay, Janet's going to check while we're in the meeting.
Okay, Alan, you have another question? Your hand is still up.
I'll pull it
No?
down.
Okay. All right, thank you. No more question, Alison? You have more to tell us?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm done.
All right then.
I think David interrupted her when she was about to say something about the budget.
Oh, I simply was going to relate to you that the budget spreadsheet that we provided to you, our expenditures as of December 15th, have us at a year-to-date having spent 8.2 million of our $10.6 million budget. We, among the post-election tasks is for us to go through all of this and work with our, we have a new analyst with the Office of Management and Budget who's going to be starting tomorrow. And we're going to be going through our expenditures, our anticipated expenditures for the remainder of the fiscal year to determine if a supplemental is required or how much of a supplemental is going to be required for this fiscal year. And then, of course, the FY24 budget is in development. And we will have an executive session, I believe, at the January meeting to discuss that.
Yes, Alex.
I mean, Allison, judging by the fact that we've now spent 8.2 out of the 10.6 million for the fiscal year, and we're only about halfway through the fiscal year, is there really any question that we're going to need a supplemental for FY23? Or is there some sense that we could stay within the 10.6 and get us through June 30th?
I certainly anticipate that we will overspend our budget for the fiscal year, but the nature and timing of the expenditures would often dictate for OMB. I mean, we typically do, but the nature and the timing of the expenditures for OMB will dictate whether they want to do a year-end transfer or whether they want to, whether a supplemental budget request is required. I do think that we're going to need a supplemental budget request for this year, but that's not really my call. That is, we just work out the numbers, lay out the numbers, and then ultimately the Office of Management and Budget will we'll decide how to finance that.
And just to follow up, I noticed that the full-time salaries and seasonal temps, we've substantially overshot our original budget. I mean, I'm sure there's a number of different reasons for that. Maybe the recount was one of them, but do you have a sense of why we ended up spending so much more than we had budgeted in those areas?
What's in that number? That's not the overtime.
Awards, personnel leave, comp leave, payouts.
I guess overtime's there too. Yeah, separate line item.
Yeah, I'm gonna have Lisa go ahead and answer your question on that.
I'm
And
sorry.
let you just say what I said. Yeah, but what you just
So
said.
Allison was just asking what is included in the full-time salaries. And full-time salaries includes personnel leave, awards, cash out, payout. So any payments that would have been paid out for awards would be added into full-time salaries. So it's breakdown, full-time salaries includes the whole amount of leave and et cetera.
Yeah, no,
You know,
I mean,
I'm sorry, one answer to your question that I just reminded me when I glanced across the table. You know, we did receive permission from the county to double encumber a position. And so actually we have both Christy Zit and Mindy Williams both sitting here at the table with me right now, occupying the same position. And so we're actually having, you know, two people in one position there with the permission of the Office of Management and Budget. So there's just sort of a combination of different factors there. But I can get a more detailed breakdown of that to you.
I mean, I think that would
See
be
what you're
helpful.
flagging. That's a significant amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty significant overshot, and if that's
Mhm.
where we are, then I think we need to really seriously think about, you know, what do we need to do to make sure the FY24 one we're asking for enough, you know?
Alex, this is Lisa. I'm sorry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at that because it could be the overall personnel cost that was put in that line item versus the actual year-to-date full-time salaries. So I'll look at that again and provide that updated number to the board members. I believe that personnel cost is the overall cost for personnel versus just the full-time salaries.
Oh, you mean the first line
The
there?
line,
full-time?
yeah, the line just dropped down. Instead of giving it overall personnel cost, it dropped down into full-time salaries.
I'm sorry, could you help explain that? Because we have full-time salaries, we have seasonal temps, and we have overtime, all of which have been overshot. And you're saying that the full-time salaries may include something else? Is that what you're saying?
So full-time salaries always includes overall, it encompasses several line items in that it accounts for annual leave, PTO, holiday paid leave out for leave for holiday pay. So that's something that we wouldn't have budgeted for. So that's added into those full-time salary line items.
Why is annual leave and holiday pay not budgeted for? Don't you have that every year?
Well, not if we didn't have an election like 4th of July where we weren't expecting to be working because we didn't have an election then. So
Oh,
there
I
are
see. So
times
you're saying you may not have anticipated
double pay for some
paying
employees.
people on July 4th.
Correct.
But that's I mean,
That's just one small piece, but it's
right.
several items that are included in that.
Okay.
Alan, you have a question?
Was Elise first?
Ladies?
May I go, Naheed?
Yeah, go ahead. Go.
Okay.
I didn't see your hand.
I just want to make sure I understand what original budget is. Is that what you originally budgeted, what you thought it was going to be? Was that sort of the estimate as of a certain time? And then what we have in the second line is what actually has happened as of December 15th or 12th, or whatever it was?
That's correct. But then in addition, so there are, I think what Lisa's saying is there's two things here. Number one, there are a number of factors that we would anticipate that full-time salaries would be over budget on, but I think she's also checking to see we may have made a clerical error in the sheet as well. And so
No, I'm not asking about that specifically. I'm asking about the entire budget. Those numbers where it says original budget, is that sort of what you estimated or thought it was going to be for this fiscal year?
Elise, I think it was what we ultimately determined we should ask the county council for and what the council gave us, I think.
It is what was,
It's the adopted
what came
budget.
through the budget process. It is the adopted budget after the county executive recommended a budget and then the county council approved it.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I wanted, just clarification on what original budget
And we
meant.
typically have a number of line items that'll of course be either over or under what the budgeted numbers were. You know, it's not at all uncommon for us to be over budget in personnel and then for there to be some funds that we end up shifting from operating to personnel. Yeah.
I mean, and Allison, my only point is maybe we need to be asking for a lot more for personnel than we have in the past, given, you know, the amount of the
Yes.
overage.
I think there's a lot of reasons to suggest that we need to ask for more for personnel in addition to that. I mean, but I agree wholeheartedly.
Alan, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question about moving services. $176,000. Was that renting trucks or what?
Moving services. Do you want to answer that?
Alan, is that on the first page or second?
It's on the first page, 60412. Moving service.
60412 more moving services. So the
Yes.
original budget was $40,000 and the year to date is 176,604.67. Yes, that would include moving services for JK Moving. And keep in mind that this is budgeted, what we budgeted for was for one election and what we spent was for 2 elections. So that's why this amount is doubled. And in between the fiscal years, they changed moving contractors. The county changed moving contractors. So we had to use a different contractor who, what we had originally they had proposed to us had to be increased because we had a new contract. The county had a new contract. So that's why that number is so high, because we had the 2 elections in this budgeted amount.
Here's my question. To what extent would it be feasible to borrow trucks from the library or other departments of the county government to use? We have to haul a lot of ballots. We have to haul the machinery, the splitters and all that stuff during canvassing and all. Could we borrow those from other county departments or buy a used truck ourselves and so we have it all the time and cut down on the leasing?
The short answer to that is yes. That is a conversation that we have had. It is something that we were more successful in being able to do in 2020 when the county effectively had an inventory of some trucks that weren't necessarily being used to the same extent that they are being used now. I mean, the nature of our needs. First off, we're talking about leveraging something that if the county, other functions of the county are more year round. And so just because we have an election doesn't mean that they don't also have work that they would have been planning to do using those vehicles during that part of the year. And then of course now we also have the challenge of the time frame of our needs expanding. And so, we needed to take a truck back and forth to the offsite canvas site every day, for example. Some of our needs are superimposed on top of a baseline level of county business where there is potentially at times some marginal availability of vehicles, but less than you might think. And then secondarily, there's a little bit more of a specialized set of needs that we have. So for example, we've had to we have vehicles available to us, but they did not have a lift gate of the size that we would have needed in order to take our ballot carts to and from the canvas. And so we had to make arrangements for a different kind of lift gate on the trucks that we used that was not otherwise available to us under a county contract.
Thank you.
David, you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Nahid. Allison, perhaps you can give us in January a deeper dive on the personnel costs, because I'm just trying to understand how it all fits together with the general idea that you have lots of vacancies and you probably have fewer people doing more work. So, or I should say, fewer people maybe even doing the same work that was done by more people in the past. So to me, I'm not surprised that there's a lot of overtime, although I would say 5 times our budgeted amount is, I mean, it's almost 5 times our budget amount. That's a huge overtime. And, you know, something for us to understand better. But I guess given all those vacancies, the idea that we're that much over on full-time salaries, and on, you know, if we have that many vacancies, I would have thought that we would be under on full-time salaries because you're not paying salaries to all the people that you would have been paying before.
We can certainly do a deeper dive on that.
So that would be helpful. I also noted under the personnel costs that there is a 0 in the category of board commission stipends, and I was wondering if you're talking about our pay, because we still get paid. It's definitely not 0. And
I believe that comes out of full-time salaries, right? Comes out of the full-time salaries line item, what the board members receive their stipend.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's budgeted in one item, but paid out of another.
So why would we do that? Why would we budget? Why would we take a budgeted item and move it into a larger item?
I think, Lisa, why don't you answer it? I'm not sure I'm giving the right answer here. You answer it.
I'm sorry, David, could you ask the question again?
Yes, there's a budgeted item for board commission stipends employee where it says that it was budgeted for $88,750. Real bargain. But under year to date, it says 0. And we know that I'll speak for myself, but I think my colleagues will agree. I've been getting paid. So it's clearly not 0. It's close to 0, but not 0. So my question is, and then Allison suggested that she thought it might be included under full-time salaries. And of course, while it may have felt like it during the canvas, we are not full-time. So I was just wondering why, if that is the case, that it was moved to a category of full-time salaries, why that would have been the case. When you have, if you have a budget line that's supposed to be, you know, the board, you know, the board salaries, why would you list it somewhere else?
So what I have learned, right, because this is not what I am accustomed to doing, but what I've learned as I am pulling these budgets and paying the bills, that when Margaret, Kira, and Allison had prepared the budget, they had put money into line items that I had to kind of try to figure out where and why and how come. But what I've learned is that the amount, yes, you're not full-time salaries, but for whatever reason, when I pull the budget spreadsheet, I get what is a personnel cost total. And the total is actually the $3,291,583.89. That number is broken down in several parts where it includes personnel leave, seasonal leave, board commission stipends, annual leave, sick leave, paid time off, comp leave, administrative leave, lump sum leave payout, shift differential, multilingual pay, holiday premium. So all those numbers encompass that 3 million that also encompasses the full-time salary. And so when I pulled it, the number, instead of, what I ended up doing was deleting that line and it brought the line item down, that full amount of the 3. The actual full-time salaries, as I pull the report as of today, is $826,138.62.
I'm
So
sorry.
going back to your. board-
You're saying
I'm
you're
gonna
saying
send an
the,
email. I was gonna send an email to that.
okay, that would be helpful. We don't need to do the deep dive right this minute, but it just seems like there's a lot of things there that don't quite, that
Add up.
could use some, yeah, they don't quite add up, and they could use some explanation.
All right, then, that's fair
Fair.
enough. That would be good, yes. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay.
Diane, you have
Yeah.
a question?
Yes, boy, my screen, oh, there we go, Naheed, now I can see you. My screen was frozen. This is, I'm segueing for a second, but just want to put it on the record. I just noticed, looking at the attendees, that Michael Fletcher has his hand up. I know that he was going to address the board at the beginning of the meeting. I just thought I would put that back up on the board.
We tried to connect him, but we had
Yes,
some
I sent an
difficulty.
email to Naheed, Diane, and David regarding Mr. Fletcher is calling in. And I have given the phone number to Jerry. And Ms. President just needs to address him, and then we can try to connect him again.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right, thank
okay.
you.
Alison, do you have anything else?
Janet did just go check the inventory, and the price that is listed for the ballot marking devices is $3,500. Is that correct, Janet? $3,500 a piece.
Thank you.
Good enough, Alan?
Yeah, let's buy a lot more.
All
I'd
right,
like to know how much they would cost with the software upgrade that we need.
That's,
So, so that we can get 14 on a page instead of 7. And then it would probably save us a bunch in printing costs for paper ballots.
okay. Noted. You finished, Alison? Anything else you wanted to tell us? You finished. Kevin?
Yes, good afternoon. I just have one matter to bring to your attention. I think a couple months ago, I told you there was a lawsuit that was filed by 3 plaintiffs against the State Board of Elections, the state prosecutor, 21 counties, and the Center for Tech and Civic Life in federal court alleging fraud and RICO violations. In essence, the plaintiffs alleged that counties were receiving money from the Center for Tech and Civic Life, and the money was being used for improper purposes of influencing voting in Maryland, to include tampering with drop boxes and things of that nature. This last week, Judge Gallagher granted a motion to dismiss on behalf of all of the defendants, basically finding that the plaintiffs in the case lacked standing under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 12B1, because they did not show any particularized harm that would be different from any other member of the public. I suspect that will be appealed. The local boards of elections are not parties to that case. And I'm not sure why every county is not a party to the case, other than I assume that there were certain jurisdictions that received no money from this organization.
Kevin, do you know, did the Montgomery County Board receive money from the Center for Tech and Civic Life?
Oh, yeah, like 800,000.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Our board did?
Oh, yeah, I lost my mind over that.
yeah. When was it? 2 years ago?
Do
Remember?
we know
Oh,
how
yeah,
the
and
money
it
was
took me
spent here?
months. It took months to get info on what that money was used for, and I still never got a breakout, but I can remember making a big deal out of it.
My recollection is it was used primarily for paying election judges.
It was used
Wait,
for
wait.
hazard pay for the election judges, and I
COVID
believe that it
protection.
was also used to pay for masks and shields.
Yeah,
and
yeah, that's what I recall.
PPE. Or I
Yeah,
thought there was a
I still
breakdown of the
would,
expenditures provided, but we
Yeah,
can look for that.
I still would be happy and would have been happy to see some paperwork on that. And I can remember many board meetings making that request.
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested to know that. I mean, that's a lot of money to spend on election judges. I mean, I don't know what the breakdown was, but that's a significant, would have been a significant portion of our budget.
That wasn't just for election, just that was for other things too. It was the same.
Right. I'd still like to see the paperwork.
So can we get that as a follow-up item to get a sense as to how that money was spent?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought it was, but maybe it wasn't. So
Well,
No,
and
it was,
yeah.
I was only ever given a verbal, and then there might have been just, if there was anything in writing, it was, you know, the $800,000. And I think we need more specificity when money is coming from a private third party to be used in our elections.
Yeah.
And I hope we don't do that again.
Evan,
So in terms of the lawsuit, they'll have 30 days to note an appeal to the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. The Fourth Circuit handles these things typically one of two ways. They either will submit a full briefing schedule with oral argument, or they'll request informal briefs by the parties and just rule on the paper. So I'm not sure how to handle if an appeal is noted at all. So,
thank you.
any questions about the case?
Right. Any question for Kevin?
No, but I look forward to an update if they appeal. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. Business. Board observation of November meeting. And any other new business too. Okay. Alan,
One
no
second.
observation for November. Everything
What-
was
Yeah, the second. I note, okay. I'd like to make a motion to urge the state board to indicate on the mail-in ballots, fill in the oval with black or blue ink, not pencil.
yes.
Um,
Maybe we can ask the state board to mention it somewhere over.
Yeah, one of the things I had in mind was buying more BMDs. We already talked about that. We need, of course, to make sure that the sample ballots highlight the polling places on the front of the brochure. It's on the back. Now everybody reads the brochure. If it's on the front, if it's in red ink, or it's clearly noted in a white, blue ink, red ink, highlighted on the first page, making sure everybody realizes where they're supposed to go. We had a fiasco, of course, at Silver Spring and probably also at Praisner and Potomac, people going to these early voting centers that are no longer early voting centers, but now they're precincts, and that
Alan,
caused
what is it that you're actually asking for on there?
on the sample ballot brochure.
Right.
Put on the front of the brochure, the voter's polling place.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's on the back now.
Yeah, it would make it more obvious, and I would put it in a different color with a frame around it or something like
Yeah,
that.
I like that. Yeah.
Make it
Yeah.
very obvious, make it hard for them to miss.
Yes.
Right now, it's easy for them to miss.
We need to have at least one additional election official at Silver Spring, Praisner, Potomac, and early voting centers where voters mistakenly thought that they were regular polling places. And what David and Elise and I did, we walked around with tablets and we asked people, do you want us to check your true polling place? And some of them said yes, and they got good answers. Some said no, and they went and voted provisionally anyway. There's one guy, I tried to point it out to him. Shall I point out your polling place? No, I can do this myself. And he's in line there, and I see that the intake judge is telling him, you're in the wrong place. And I see he's got the brochure. And I started pointing at the brochure, say, in the brochure, and he said, thank you, Captain Obvious. Well, he could have looked at it right away himself when he got it, but he was carrying around and didn't pay attention to it. I think we having signs at those centers also is important. Signs showing with maps showing that, okay, Silver Spring, there are two polling places there, two precincts that vote there on election day. If you are in these precincts, you can vote here. But if you're not in these two precincts, look up your correct precinct at electionsmaryland.gov. Um, we need to increase the public service announcements to educate voters on using ink, not pencil, and finding their correct polling places. One issue that I encountered, a friend of mine had qualified to be an election judge, but for health reasons couldn't go that day. He wanted to serve as an early voting election judge. And Boris said the policy is no, he couldn't do it. You have to be an election day judge before you can serve as an early voting judge. I like for us to look into that policy and see.
I thought we were told that that policy was not in place for this election, but maybe I was told wrong.
This judge nominee was turned away. He couldn't vote in early. He couldn't serve in early voting. Let's see. We want to download ideas from judges right after early voting and after election day. They have good ideas. See what they've got to say about improving the process. And I mentioned this before during early voting. I like the direction to voters at the intake. You can vote either by pen or touch screen. Touch screen appeals to people more than electronics or computer, but it's very popular anyway. So more ballot marking devices. Those are my ideas.
Okay.
Alan, are you making a formal motion to send a letter to the?
I did make a motion at the very outset, a motion for our board to urge the State Board of Elections to use to state on the ballots, fill in the oval with black or blue ink, not pencil.
May I ask a question, Alan, before we get to your motion? Is it your thought that we should be sending a letter just with that one suggestion? Or do you think that we should send a letter to the state board with all of whatever suggestions we have? Because I know there's a number of things that we may have suggestions for the state board on. For example, the phraseology of the provisional ballot application in the primary would be another example of something we might be asking the state board about.
I'll answer a question with a question. Is it more effective to be efficient, to have a lot of these ideas in one motion, in one letter, or individually?
Well, I'll answer your question with a question. If you were the recipient of if you were the recipient of 10 letters from the Montgomery County Board of Elections with 10 different suggestions, might you ask yourself, why did they send me 10 letters?
Okay.
Well, I think the issue is we might not necessarily agree on all the recommendations. I certainly could agree with some of them, but
right?
Probably not all of them. So
yeah, yes.
Okay. So to answer your question, let's do this piecemeal. But if enough people want to vote for more things to go in that letter, then the opportunity is available.
Well,
Hey, Kevin, but
I was going to suggest the opposite, but okay.
Perhaps, and maybe this complicates matters for you, maybe it makes it easier, I don't know. But the topic has come up before, and I'm trying to tap my memory of how long ago it was that we previously had discussed this question of the type of and blue, black, pencil, what is allowable for voters to do and what the guidance is and should be on the ballot itself. And when I had looked into it previously, what I had determined was that when a voting system goes through federal certification, it is tested with it is tested using a specific protocol with a specific kind of pen. And I believe that it's a certain, I don't remember exactly, it's like a black Bic pen or something. But there's what this equipment is actually tested to the standard using. And then there is what the tolerance is that the vendor then provides guidance to the state on as far as what will work, and the conversations that go on between the vendor and the state as the procurer of this product and designer of the ballot. And then beyond that, there is our lived experience with what we see as far as what is marked on the ballot and what is not marked on the ballot, and how it scans. And so I know, Janet can probably best characterize what we see as the user when voters use different types of marking devices, and what we then perhaps should carry back to either the voter information, what we advise voters on, the advice on the verbiage to appear on the ballot, but then also, the testing and the certification of the equipment itself. And there's, I think, a couple of different pieces of this and areas for that conversation to be had. And I'm quite frankly, I don't remember when we last had this conversation, what the outcome of it was, and if we had previously made a recommendation to the state or not, or what response we had received. So I'm happy to explore it. I'm happy to, work with the board on it and have us report back. But I'm not sure that I'm not sure how to advise you on the phrasing of this letter and what the tolerance is and what flexibility we have under our federal certification and under the agreement between the state and the vendor on, what can be done on that language or what should be done on the language. I don't know if that helps or complicates things.
Alan, do you have a motion on the floor or not yet?
Yes, yeah.
The motion is on the floor once the president states it and it's on the floor.
Well, it has to be seconded as well.
Yeah, it has to be seconded. So.
I plan not to second it because I agree with the idea, but I think that we should all give our presentations of our observations before we start making motions on any changes.
Okay, I'll withhold the motion until we finish our observations.
May I make a suggestion that
Yeah.
after the board's observations that we prepare a list and you all discuss in January which ones there is unanimous approval to go ahead and make the recommendation. I think many of them, almost all of them, there will be unanimous agreement, and then all those can be put in a letter.
Yeah.
But that's a more time-consuming exercise than just today.
I think it's an excellent suggestion. I would just add to that for many of the things that we might ask the state to do, we might want to first ask ourselves, can we do it?
Right.
So
exactly.
if it turns out that we want the message out that says, don't use pencil, and the state wants to fight with us about whether we should say that, then let's put it into a video on our website and tells people, or any other form of communications that we control. Because I'm pretty sure that the don't use pencil would be a unanimous vote of this board, given all the time we spent watching people deal with that issue. But we don't know whether the state will agree with that or not. Most of them have never even seen us do a canvas once.
Yeah. Yep. All right then. No motion. Kevin, what's the final?
Well, I think the board needs to just give their observations, whoever's next up.
Nobody's saying anything.
I'm deferring to others. I thought since Alan went first that perhaps it should be somebody else next. And not me.
Alex hand is up. Okay, Alex, go ahead.
I mean, I don't have a lot of extensive comments or observations to make. I'd have to think a little bit more about it, but I think probably one of our top priorities should be to urge the legislature to change the rules on web delivery ballots. And, however nice and convenient those have been, making them available to every registered voter, I think is a mistake, given just the practical limitations of what can be done with these and the sheer amount of time and manpower it takes to duplicate them. That slowed things down incredibly. And I think, however regrettable in some people's minds, I think we need to limit those, to overseas diplomatic personnel, military, and maybe certain other categories of special categories where it can clearly be justified.
No, I clearly agree, but let me make a couple of comments on the whole web ballot issue. I think it's going to be very hard politically to take back something that we have offered the public. I just think that's on its face a difficult issue. But let me make another comment here. I did some research on this particular topic and met with a guy who is an expert on this sort of thing. And he pointed out to me that there is a system in New Hampshire that they use for web ballots that makes their life much easier. Now, this is not a total solution to all of our problems, but it certainly is one where the web ballot actually, when it comes out of your computer, comes out with a QR code. And that if you use a QR reader and program that reader to duplicate the web ballot on a regular ballot card, that it will work. And that's what New Hampshire has used in the last 2 elections. And it is my suggestion that we do a little investigating on that. It may be too expensive to be practical. It may be too high-techy for a lot of people to be comfortable with. But I am informed that that system does work, and I think we ought to find out more.
So, Ami, you're saying that there's some kind of printing machine that actually prints the ballot with all the ovals filled in on the printer, just according to what the QR code data says?
That's correct.
I mean,
That's awesome.
I guess it'd be interesting to see how something like that worked.
So it's certainly feasible, and I know enough about computer programming to believe the feasibility, but I think we need to get in touch with the New Hampshire board and find out more about it.
Yeah, because procurements take a long time.
I know. Hey, I work for the government. I know.
Yeah,
Yes, I was going to say.
So do we. But I mean, I think
and that would have to be a state approved deal.
Yes, of course it would, but we need to know more about it before we even suggest it.
And we are definitely the most affected by this problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would say, number one, I agree with Ami about the political feasibility of banning it. My own approach, and I love the idea of a technology solution, probably because people are nervous about QR codes. You'd still want to have a bipartisan team that makes sure it's right.
Sure.
But it would be a lot faster than the process that we have now. My own thought about the web delivery question, without going into all my other observations, is that we can still do a lot about informing voters as to what they're actually getting, as opposed to web delivered sounds great. It sounds modern. I would call them self-addressed duplicated ballots or SAD ballots, because you have to address them. You have to print them yourself, and it's multiple pages. And I definitely know voters who said, I don't want to print that many pages. And then you have to find your own envelope, you have to find your own stamp, and then we have to duplicate them. And I think most voters, if they understood that, would not do it. And I think every effort we've made to get the state to address that issue has resulted in only incremental changes. But we have our own website. We could have our own messaging. I would think that we could have even a humorous video of someone who requests a web delivery ballot, and then the plight of that ballot, because I think it would surprise a lot of people if they saw it, and maybe we can knock down the number in half. and then use.
That's interesting. I've never known
Yeah.
you, Mr. Neiman, to actually suggest using, a video to discourage people from using a voting method. That comes as a great surprise to me.
I am not discouraging people from using a voting method. I want them to be appropriately informed about the method they're choosing. I personally believe that all voters should be able to use all the methods that are available. I do not want election officials to have to decide which methods which voters can use. But I do think that the vast majority of voters do not know what's involved with web delivery ballots. And I think that it's actually completely consistent with everything I've ever said to suggest that we educate people about what that process involves. But let me say this, I have a very hard time with banning web delivered ballots as long as US mail delivered ballots take more than 2 weeks to arrive.
Well,
And
I'm not calling
that's a major problem.
using the word ban is kind of.
Excuse me, I'm talking now.
No, but hold on a second. I had the floor. I was making my observations. I wasn't advocating for a total ban.
No, you were advocating for a ban for everyone but overseas
Yeah.
diplomatic personnel and military.
And perhaps certain other categories of people.
And what I'm saying is that if you request a ballot online and you live in Maryland and you try to get it by US mail, you don't expect it to take more than 2 weeks for it to arrive at your door. But my understanding is that 2 weeks was below the average time it took for the ballots to arrive at the door. That wasn't our doing, that was the state's contractors doing. But as long as it's taking more than 2 weeks for people to get US mail ballots, I have a hard time telling those voters, don't do web delivery, because 2 weeks is a long time for mail to arrive. It shouldn't take 2 weeks for a US mail ballot to arrive. And if we can get the US mail ballots to be delivered consistently, then we can start talking about limiting the use of the web delivered ballots because they won't be needed nearly as much.
Well,
But 2 weeks is a long time to wait for a ballot.
Well, do you know how many web delivery ballots were requested by people who had already requested one by mail?
I don't. But that's not. But that's not the point. The point is that when I go onto the website and it's October 15th, and I'm trying to figure out which method I'm going to use to ask for my ballot, and I have to choose between U.S. mail and web delivery, and I'm worried because I've heard from a number of my neighbors that they haven't gotten their ballot yet. And what I'm saying is under those circumstances, it is not irrational for some voters to say, I'll do the web delivery, that'll only take a few days. If I do the US mail, who knows how long it will take.
But we don't know how many people had that motivation when they asked for web delivery, right?
We don't. But we do know, and the data could probably be available. Allison, another follow-up for you. I'd like to know how many voters it took more than 2 weeks for them to get their US mail requested ballot. It's a huge number.
We aren't going to be able to find that out, David.
Yeah.
That's a post office problem, not.
No, that's not true.
It's partly.
I am sorry, but the board has access to data about that.
It's partly, what the board has access to is when did the contractor send them? That has nothing to do with when people receive them.
I'm well aware of that fact. What I'm telling you is that members of our staff, if you checked with them about a particular ballot that was mailed, they had the ability to see where it was in the mail stream and to see whether it had been delivered. And they actually had a running count as to the average amount of time that it took for it to be received. My 2 weeks is not hyperbole. The last time I heard that number, it was 17 days. And
Okay.
17 days on average means that half of them took more than 17 days.
Okay, if they've got the data, I stand corrected. I was not aware of that. But part of the whole issue, though, is how do we deal with the post office?
Absolutely. And as you heard, I plan to help with that because, and I already have. I already sent an inquiry to Senator Van Hollen to get him to ask the Postal Service about what's going on with our postmarks.
On
the
behalf
issue.
of the board, you ask him or you ask him?
No, on behalf of myself, I asked him. But I'm telling you now that that's what I did because I'm hoping that we can get information. You know, one of the things that we ran into were those very ambiguous postmarks that we couldn't tell, when someone mailed their ballot, and that, has legal significance for us. So I'm hoping that, that we can get some answers.
Well, I am just as concerned about what happened with what we saw this morning or this afternoon on our canvas, where things had been mailed and took weeks to get to us after they had been mailed timely.
You're saying from overseas?
From anywhere.
Yeah.
Diane, your hand is up. You have
Yeah,
something.
I just want to add it. It would be irresponsible of me not to add my usual admonition that if more people who could avail themselves, who are in the area, could vote in person, the huge volume of mail-in ballots and the problems with postal delivery, which now leads to a discussion of why we then have to expand web delivery, or why everybody needs web delivery, and all the problems that adds. Every time we expand with a solution, it begets more problems. And I felt it necessary to say we have 8 days of early voting, multiple sites. I think that this board should do a more robust, I don't think it's very robust actually, but should do a robust job when we talk about informing the public of drawbacks of certain methods of voting, that the tried and true oldest standard we have is in-person voting. And I respect the opinions of, or the sentiment that one method should be available to everybody, but I do believe with all the problems with web delivery, we need to limit who that's extended to until or unless our board, our state board, and the legislature can adopt a method that can handle these new methods. Thank you.
Okay.
If you were to follow that theory for election day voting as to whether we can handle it, there's a lot of evidence that we can't. Because in 2018, we had 1/4 of all of our precincts that had wait times of longer than 30 minutes, which is the national standard. We've had shortages of election judges in every election since I've been on the board, and probably every election since Nahid has been on the board longer than me. And we have issues with every method of voting. There is no method of voting that doesn't have issues.
I agree. I didn't contradict that.
Okay, but you're saying that if everybody who voted by mail voted in person, we would have very long lines at
Okay,
voting,
I don't think anybody heard
in
me
person.
say, David,
He did
I
not
don't
say
think
that.
anybody heard
Did
me
not say
say everybody should vote in person. I put a very clear qualifier on that, so it didn't sound like a ridiculous statement.
Okay,
I
well,
think everybody understood what my message was.
Okay, well, I will just say then that my thought is that all of our methods of voting have pros and cons and issues attached to them. And voting in person certainly has its advantages, but it also has its issues. And I personally think that it's a good thing that we provide people with options. I think we should educate them about those options so that they
Agreed.
can use them as well, as well as they can. Telling people the best times to vote if they don't want to be in line, telling people what to expect in terms of vote by mail.
Okay.
All I'm saying is that one of the things that we need to educate people on is how long they need to wait in order to get a US mail ballot, because
Yeah,
that
yes.
impatience leads to the provisional ballots as well.
Yes, I agree.
All
And
right.
with all
Yes.
of the above.
Thank you. Any other new business? You have? Go ahead, David.
If we're on to new business, I would like to discuss at the January meeting, and I will propose a policy on behalf of the board. There is apparently some ambiguity as to what the board's policy is or should be if we learn after election day, but right after election day, that one of our election workers tested positive for COVID or another disease. And what I plan to propose at our January meeting is that our policy be that when that happens, that we will send a communication to all of the election workers at that location, telling them that somebody tested positive and to take whatever action they deem appropriate. And I want to make very clear, I am not suggesting any specific actions that any individual should take, but I do think that if we learn that, given that we're talking about, all of our election judges are volunteers, many of our election judges are my age or older. I think it would be common courtesy for us to make sure that in that circumstance, people are notified and they can go get tested. They can decide not to go see grandma if that's what's appropriate. They can respond accordingly. So that's something that I plan to bring up in January.
Thank you, David. Yes, we talk about it. Thank you so much. Any other new business? Okay, old business. Any old business? Alan? No. All right, move on. Action item. Alison, do you remember any action item which?
The notes that I have are that I did commit to send by the end of the week my draft outline of what I am looking to say at the Maryland Association of Counties panel on January 5th, that I would also share some thoughts, which I gave some off-the-cuff verbal thoughts, but I would also share my own personal thoughts on the legislative or policy considerations moving into the next couple of weeks in our discussions for the board. And that I would do that by the end of the week. I have a couple of specific things that I wrote down that a question was asked about what percentage of in-person voters use the BMDs overall. These are in sequential order from what I wrote down during the meeting and not necessarily grouped thematically. I have a note here to give a deeper dive on personnel and overtime and what our personnel costs look like at the January meeting. I have a note here to provide information to the board on how the Center for Technology and Civic Life funds were spent. I have a number of observations that the board members have given on the election that we will take into account in preparing our report back to the board, that I think I hear a general agreement that our approach to preparing for the February meeting will be, will work for now. I'll obviously work with the board chair and figuring out exactly how we're going to stage this, but I
think we had a
nodding and
request.
not shaking about that.
I think we had a request from at least some of us on the board that take place at the January meeting, given the legislative schedule, or at least anything that potentially could affect legislation.
Yes, yes. Okay.
I just don't want to, I don't want to rush all of the staff work to be done and wrapped up in January. I'm not saying that we can't do some more meaty conversations at the January meeting, but I don't want to promise that we'll have it all done.
Well, can you promise that
January.
you'll have everything done that relates to legislation, given that the February meeting will be too late to introduce legislation without a special vote of each chamber of the state legislature?
We can certainly set a goal and a priority of that, sure.
Allison, why can't we just say, yes, it's going to be on the agenda in January? I'm really having a hard time, we're telling you about a schedule that's determined, I believe, by the Maryland Constitution. Okay, so it's not something that we invented. It's not a man-made deadline that we're just arbitrarily picking. And basically what we're saying to you is, if you want to have input into what we're going to say to the legislature, we need to hear from you in a timely fashion. You, plural, everybody. We think you're experts. We think that you guys did a wonderful job in a very difficult circumstance, but we think we want to get your input in a timely fashion to make a difference. And I realize that it is burdensome to people to do it in January, but if we don't do it in January, you and I both know the legislature is not going to address election issues in the 2024 session. The 2023 session is our opportunity in order to make changes. So why is it so hard to say we will discuss it at the January 23rd meeting?
I'm perfectly happy to discuss it at the January meeting. I mean, I don't set the agenda. The board chair sets the agenda, but I'm perfectly happy to discuss it at the January meeting.
Okay. All right then.
I was just reviewing the rest of my notes for what the action items might be.
You're supposed to call the Rockville post office, schedule a meeting, and let me know when it is so I can attend.
Anybody else wanted to attend? Until then offer it to other people.
No, happy to have company,
Yeah,
although
I'm saying-
I don't know whether I don't know whether it has to be only two of us.
I'm
It
just
has to be
saying that.
not a quorum.
In case somebody wanted, otherwise, okay then.
That's
You
great.
have it. Yeah, all right then. Thank you. Approval of the meeting, one at a time.
Allison, you didn't mention,
Yeah.
asked who, other than you, who else might be going to the Joint Election Officials Liaison Conference in Virginia on the 11th? You said there might be others in addition to you?
Correct. I have not made those arrangements yet, so I can't tell you who
Yeah.
because I haven't made arrangements for it yet.
No, that's on the action item list. I don't expect you to know now.
Will do.
And could we get in a general sense the available data without too much additional research on how long it took mail-in ballots to arrive by US mail?
You're saying for January instead of February?
Yes.
Okay, we'll check with the state. What I'm hearing is that what was described by board members earlier, we had a portal that was available to us during the election where we were able to, in real time, to track the status of individual voters' ballots when we looked it up it's a product that the vendor provides that is feed into an interface that they have with the Postal Service for us to track an individual voter's ballot. That system is not currently available to us. What we're going to have to do is to work with the state to gain access to whatever data they have from it, whatever reporting is still available, and we will do that.
Okay,
And we
thank
will
you.
strive to do that by the January meeting.
All right, good enough. Anything else? Alison?
Nope, I just scrolled
Nope.
through my list. I believe that's all of the
All right.
action items we discussed.
Okay, then. Thank you very much. Approval of the minute, September 19, 2022.
I move we approve them as corrected.
Second,
As corrected
Okay,
by
I don't
Mr.
know which one of you was
doesn't
second.
matter.
I'll let Diane have it.
Those in favor say aye. Approval of the minute.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. The next one is October 17, 2022.
Okay, I move we accept the
That
October
minute,
17th, 2022
as
minutes.
amended.
Yes, as
Amended by Mr.
amended.
Banoff?
Alice will second it, Alice?
Yes, I will second as amended by
Those
Mr.
in favor
Banoff.
of the motion?
It's,
Aye.
Over.
November 8, 2022.
I'll move we accept those minutes as amended and corrected.
Second.
Diane, those in favor? Aye.
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 November 30th, 2022.
Okay, who wants a
Come on.
turn?
At least you get to do it this
Come on,
time.
Elise.
Okay, Liz, you do it.
Minutes as amended.
September 30th.
Second.
So,
No, November 30th.
yeah, November 30.
Yeah.
Approve.
Aye.
Second.
Guess everybody's tired. Their hand cannot go up. All right, then. These are all minutes. Future meeting or next.
Before you get to future meetings, I think you still have Mr. Fletcher.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding. Lisa?
Yeah, let's try it.
Lisa? Somebody's on the phone. 30196. That's Mr. Fletcher's number.
I believe Jerry's already promoted a phone number to the panel, so I believe that that's underway.
The number is
Mr. Fletcher, can you hear
Yeah.
us?
no, because it's a block, it's a red things and the
Oh,
mark.
he's muted?
Unmute.
Yeah.
Hello.
Here we go.
Now we can
Hello?
hear you.
What do you know? The old-fashioned way. Alexander Graham Bell.
Yes.
Here we go.
All right. My name is Michael Fletcher. I live in Durwood, Maryland. In the past, I have sent letters to the board to express my concerns regarding the use of electronic voting machines in our elections. Today, I would like to bring to your attention some more recent information that bolsters my case for eliminating machines in our voting system. First, you may be aware of the lawsuit filed in Maricopa County, Arizona, regarding fraud in last month's election. This lawsuit points out significant problems with voting machines used in the elections. There is a hearing today to see if the lawsuit goes forward. Second, a team of researchers studying voter roll accuracy has determined that electronic voter rolls pose a significant problem for election integrity. Access to electronic voter rolls allows real-time changes to be made. The researchers found that in one county that was analyzed, the researchers determined that approximately 42,000 changes to the election rolls were made within weeks of the election. About 21,000 new voters were added to the election rolls within 29 days of the election. In Florida, they found a street that did not exist, except for getting mail-in ballots returned. Ballots were mailed to those citizens and never found the voter. Voter registration cards were sent on a different date. Perceptive postman saw one of the names and he knew the recipient. So he delivered the card and its recipient alerted the voter integrity team to the existence of the fake street. In Dallas, they ran tests showing people who voted in person on day 3 of early voting had their ballots changed on day 11 to absentee. Manipulation of electronic voter rolls is difficult to detect because a change can be made and then changed back without election supervisors being aware. Voters can be changed from inactive to active and then changed back again, and how would anyone ever know? Third, in recent years, there has been a trend towards centralizing voting systems. One of the beauties of our voting system in the USA is its decentralization. States run their voting systems. This makes it very difficult for those who would manipulate elections to affect countrywide election results. Unfortunately, in the name of national security, the federal government is pushing the county towards a centralized election system. An example of this is the Albert Censor System. I wonder if Montgomery County uses the Albert Censor System. It most likely does, because almost 100% of counties in the U.S. have installed Albert Censors. Albert is a black box server installed on a county's network. It collects the traffic flowing on their election network and transmits this data to a nonprofit organization in New York. It is black box because the counties know little about the system. They are given no dashboard to see activity, no reports on what was captured, not even what Albert observed. In 2019, election data accumulated by Albert was moved to the Amazon cloud service. Our election data now leave a county and travel to parts unknown, possibly even overseas. Now, thanks to machines, Amazon has substantial involvement in our elections. These are additional examples of why Montgomery County should not rely on voting machines. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you all have a happy holiday season.
Thank you.
Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you very much.
Any thought?
Allison, I must profess my ignorance. This Albert system, is that something that's used?
I'm sure that, well, let me put it this way. I am sure that Montgomery County is using whatever the state of the art is in terms of the sophistication of the tools that are used to protect government networks, but I am not an expert on what those are as far as Montgomery County's own network transmission. Now, of course, with the state, we have the state voter registration system that is a network unto itself and a closed network within the counties in the state. We have the separate networks that we use, two separate networks that we use for reporting election night results and for reporting the official results. And then, of course, we have the networks that we're using for our sort of everyday email correspondence. And so in terms of the word voting system, I think would tend to, I assume that what Mr. Fletcher is referring to would be the official network that we use for the election results. And that is a state system that is configured where we have user access to that system. We don't own that system. The state sets that up and configures the workstations here at our local offices that connect to the state. And so really questions about how that is set up would be something that I would prefer to have someone from the state answer to than for me to. And similarly, the sort of technical side of what is of network security, we have a whole IT shop in the county that handles our county networks that we're users of, and so they would be the ones to bring into any conversation about network security for our county systems.
Naheed?
Yes, Diane.
I, and to Kevin, I have been reading about the Albert Censor System, and I share Mr. Fletcher's concerns about it. And I would really like to learn more about what sort of systems our election process, the configuration entails, because I think there are a lot more off-ramps than prior to this year I ever was aware or imagined. So number one, specifically the Albert sensor system, from what I've been reading, I think warrants some looking into, please. And then again, just in general, I would really like to see some sort of a portion of one of our meetings where we can have somebody explain to us what all these many hookups are that heretofore I think none of us are aware.
Thank you, Diane. Alan?
Yeah, Allison, am I correct that the votes are put at the scanners, are put onto thumb drives, and that there are regional centers that will send results by modem, not by internet, to the headquarters, and that the only time that those votes actually hit the internet are when we send those to the state?
There are two, and I'm looking at Janet so that she can correct me on anything that she wants to correct or elaborate on from what I say. But there are two thumb drives in each one of the scanners. When the results are shut down at the end of the night on that scanner, we have a printout of the results. And then we have one thumb drive that ultimately gets inserted into what we call the election night reporting network. And then we have another thumb drive that ultimately gets inserted into the official results network. And each of these, they're separate systems. They are in the course of our post-election audit. One of the things that we do is actually physically go through and review the tapes and manually type in for a certain percentage of our polling places, the results that printed from that machine at the polling place, and compare that to the results that we've reported for that precinct on election night, and then in the official results for election day. So yes, there are two different systems, and there's a paper printout, each configured differently.
And when is the internet involved in this process, if at all?
Never.
I'll let Janet give you a more technical answer to that than I can.
Never.
I think it's,
Never.
It's never connected to the internet.
That's what I
Never.
thought. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes, Alex.
I just wanted to support Diane's request that at an appropriate time, when there is time, I'd like to learn more about what an Albert sensor is. Do we have one? Do we use it? What does it do? I think a lot of what Mr. Fletcher talked about, I'm not exactly sure what he's suggesting, but I would like to learn more about the Albert sensor system if in fact we use it, or if we don't, it'd be good to know that too.
The Montgomery County Board of Elections does not have an Albert sensor. We are users of multiple systems that are owned by the county and by the state. Now I'm happy to have our team work with the security experts on best articulating the variety of ways in which we're supported in the systems that we use. I don't want to speak beyond my expertise on how all of the different systems that we use in any sort of way are configured, or what tools are used with them. But we can
so,
certainly do that.
yeah. So can I elaborate on my request then? I'm referring to a larger system than the county. We are hooked in with the state. There's got to be some sort of internet connection for them to get the info from us. I think it's more complicated than just saying we're never connected to the internet. Obviously, there's data going all over the place. So I would like the presentation to give us a primary education and then a more sophisticated understanding of the system that we have that connects us to the state, which I would probably suspect may have the Albert sensor system.
We don't.
So I don't want to contain this request just to Montgomery County, because obviously we are just a small set of the entire state. If that helps clarify.
Sure.
Thank you.
David. David.
Well, I think that Janet wanted to say something.
We
You
Jan-
should go
never
first.
Jan-
on the we are never on the internet. We are networked to the state. It's a direct line to the state. It's no internet connection whatsoever. We cannot have any internet even loaded to any of those computers downstairs. It's prohibited by the state. We have a
Thank-
direct line network to the state.
Okay.
And I was just going to add that I wouldn't want us to make any assumptions that I know I personally don't know about what systems the state uses and what systems they don't, and what systems we use and we don't. I think I would just like for our future conversation to deal with the various things that Mr. Fletcher dealt with in his letter. Some of those he's talking about Arizona, they may not be relevant to Maryland at all, but they might be. And I think it makes sense to, if we can put people at ease by saying, yeah, that's an interesting thing about that system over there, but we don't use it over here. I don't know that I need to know everything about that system that Arizona uses it if we don't. But I do think it makes sense as a matter of being responsive to Mr. Fletcher, who I would add, I learned during early voting is a former election judge for us. So thank you for your service. But I would think that we would want to just be able to, to respond kind of point by point to what he brings up.
Well,
Thank you. Yes, Ami.
I think it would be useful for all of us to simply know a little bit more about all the systems that are used. I mean, I'm not a technology expert, and it would be helpful to get a briefing from somebody, probably at the state level, who understands exactly what systems are used throughout Maryland.
We can definitely make that request.
Yeah.
Try to consult with
I-
the state and pulling together what we can for you, or see if we can get somebody from the state to come out and do that.
All right. Okay.
And in
Thank you.
my reading on the Albert sensor system, it was also suggested that, I don't know if you remember my second year in, when we had the Mayo conference in Annapolis, we had some FBI, an agent Marino gave a presentation, and they talked about their interest in keeping our elections safe. And I know that there's a nexus, or I don't know anything because I'm very technologically limited. My understanding is this is sort of all wrapped together. So maybe when we talk about the systems that we have, we could connect it to that, some of that information that seems to be sort of a black hole, but that is apparently a very important part of the nationwide, state down to county election security system, which may be part of the issues that Mr. Fletcher raised. So we're kind of making this bigger, but I guess just to ask for like Ami said, a big picture, which extends it out to that level.
Diane, did you have an idea as to when you wanted to get this information?
Oh,
No, I would-
yesterday.
Yeah, no, we're not planning another election in the next couple months. I would prefer that the staff be able to get a thoughtful presentation together, and or spokespersons who can give it to us. I would certainly hope within, the next 3 months.
All right, that's
That's
fair enough.
reasonable.
Yeah. Thank you. All right then. Any other matter? Nothing? Next meeting, January 23rd at 2:30 p.m. 2023, not 2022.
You want to discuss the next meetings, David?
J-
Okay.
huh? What was it?
A question whether you want to make them earlier.
Liv? Do you want to change the date? And
I
No?
yield to the board.
Well, I
No.
think
We-
it's been on the calendar for a long time.
Yeah.
We can go with the 23rd. I just want us to be ready to roll with anything to do with
Right, yeah.
legislation with
Okay.
hopefully reports long before that, like a week or more before that, so we can read them. And then, the board can then hopefully, work its will on the 23rd and still have time to influence the legislative process.
Because January 16 is Martin Luther King Day, so we stay with January 23rd. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So move.
Second.
Second,
Adjourn the meeting. You second. Those in favor? So we have another Zoom, guys. 5 minutes.
can we have 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
And
5
that
minutes.
link
Okay.
should have been sent to you about 15 minutes ago.
I,
Thank you.
well, what do
I
you
know.
think? Should we
So fast.